There are three ways for us to experience something. We can experience things through our senses. So, for instance, our senses of sight and hearing and taste and touch and smell. So when I walked in my grandmother's house, I could smell bread baking. Nice, wonderful experience. I love seeing a gelateria along the streets of Rome and stopping in there and being able to have coconut gelato. Wonderful experience to my senses. I remember waking up on a Christmas morning and finding my new red bicycle. Seeing that red bicycle there was unbelievable. A wonderful experience for my senses. So there are ways that we experience things through our senses. All of us. There are also ways of experiencing things through the intellect. I enjoy sitting down and reading a book that helps me to understand something that I was not able to comprehend. A few weeks ago, I watched a movie called Sunshine, and it was about the exploration of the sun, or going into the sun. And I had to go back to my books to find out what was the sun made of. What are the planets? What is the orbit? A lot of those things I forgot. So I needed to experience that on the intellectual level because I can see the sun. But in order to understand it, I needed to understand it on a different level. My bicycle. I remember seeing my bicycle. I remember knowing how I had to learn to ride it. I had to learn to pedal. I had to learn to balance myself. I knew all the intellectual things. But every time I would get on that bicycle, guess what would happen? I'd fall off. And then all of a sudden, there was one day, I'm riding the bicycle. I see the bicycle with my senses. I know what I'm supposed to do in my head, in my intellect. And then all of a sudden, you know that first day when you ride your bike and all of a sudden it works and you experience something beyond the senses and the intellect. You experience something even deeper, something the spirit, just when you let loose, something fantastic. The same thing happens with love. Sometimes we know love. I can see a couple who is in love. I can see a person who loves very deeply. And I can watch that and I can admire that. I know what love is supposed to be. But when you fall in love, it's a whole different experience, isn't it? It's something beyond just the senses. It's something beyond the intellect. It's in the spirit. John the Baptist came trying to help us as a people to experience the reality of God in a whole different way. And the gospel says today that he pointed out the Lamb of God. But he taught the people that they could experience God in the temple with the senses. They could smell the incense rising, and they could have that experience of God. We have that experience, I hope, in here. We see the religion, we see the Stations of the Cross, we see the altar, we see the crucifix, we see the windows. They all appeal to our senses. Then we can experience our religion through our intellect. We can go to classes, we can read, we can study our theology. There's all kinds of things that we can do. We can study all the laws of the church. We can know everything that we're supposed to do. So we can know the church and we can know God on the level of the senses. We can know God on the level of our intellect. But John wants us to experience God on the personal level. Something deeper, something beyond, in the very Spirit. And so John today is pointing out to the people that Jesus is the way, that our belief in Jesus and that love of Jesus, that reality of Jesus, is what can take away all the obstacles to our seeing the Lord present in our life, God's presence in our daily life. And John tries to teach us that the love of God that is within us and the love of God which we can experience can take us to a whole different level of our faith. Take us beyond just the senses. Take us beyond just the intellect. Take us to the very heart where love absolutely resides, where love is real. Now, when I was thinking of John pointing out the Lamb of God, see, we can do the same thing. We can be pointers, like St. John the Baptist. We can point out the Lamb of God. And we can say, there's the Lamb of God, there's Jesus. You'll find him over there in that church. You'll find him over there in this particular situation. Or we can say, you can look at this book and you can find him in this book. But you remember, we always said, when you point your fingers, what are there? There are three pointing back to you. And so we are the ones. We are the ones, when we point out the Lamb of God, when we point out the reality of God to our children, to those who are having difficulty believing and those who do believe, there's three fingers pointing back to us. Because it reminds us that we have to be the incarnation of God's love. We have to be the presence of God's love. And people can experience our lives. They can experience us. They can see us in our senses, through their senses. They can experience us through our intellects. But most of all, they will experience us through the very love that we share and express each and every day. So this week we are called, like John the Baptist, to point out the Lamb of God. So when you start to point, remember those three pointing back to you and what we are called to be as God's people.